Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to week 4, and this is on Tableau extensions. Week 4, it has 2 parts. The first part is going over the visualization and communication between the Tableau dashboard and the visualization. And the second part is to write back data from the Tableau dashboard into a backend database. So that's the Tableau extensions write back. And that is part 2, which we will cover next week. This week is part 1. We're going to focus on advanced visualization. So let's go ahead and take a look at the very basic functionality of how the Tableau desktop works with D3.js, which is a very popular graphics library. So that's our kind of focus for today, understanding the different functions in JavaScript and how to connect Tableau data to the D3.js to provide interaction. So Tableau provides 2 sets of APIs. One is called the Tableau JavaScript API, and another one is called the Tableau Extensions API. The Tableau JavaScript API is used in a website outside of the Tableau desktop, Tableau web environment. So it's used in your website. So if you're embedding a Tableau visual in your website, you can use Tableau JavaScript API to interact with the Tableau visual. Now the Tableau Extensions API is a little different. The Tableau Extensions API works inside of your Tableau web or your Tableau desktop, and it interacts directly with your visualization, but not just interacts, but you can send information from your Tableau dashboard to the JavaScript and visualize it outside of the Tableau visualization visualization library. So if you have your own library that you want to use to visualize, you can use the Tableau extensions to take data from Tableau and visualize it independently of Tableau while using the same namespace, security, and some of the other benefits that you get with the platform. So that's the Tableau Extensions API. So think of it as one is going from Tableau desktop or Tableau server to the JavaScript. Another one is a JavaScript going into the Tableau visual and interacting with it. So these are the kind of two ways that you can interact with the visuals. And next week, we're going to try to blend these two together and come up with, okay, now how can we add forecast data and have it dynamically be updated in the database right from the visual itself, so that we're taking it to that next level. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the Tableau JavaScript API first, and then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Tableau Extensions API, and then we're going to look at some visuals on how this is all put together. The first is the Tableau Extensions website. That's the URL there. You can go. There's the GitHub where you can download the API. There's a community. There's also an extensions gallery where you can look at other vendors who have published extensions. So starting with the Tableau extensions, the extensions has 5 objects. As you can see here, the Tableau, the extensions, the dashboard content, setting, environment, and UI. So these are some of the high-level APIs. And when you use the Tableau JavaScript API or the Tableau Extensions API, you're essentially using one of these high-level APIs and modifying it to fit your need. And we'll take a look at that as we go further into the model. So starting with the Tableau's extensions container, which I'm going to go ahead and start explaining, an extensions container is something. The extensions container is something that you will be pulling into the Tableau desktop. So let me show you how that's done. So we're going to pull up our Tableau. And we're going to take a look at our first example. So this is an extension that was built on top of Tableau, and this visualization is not part of the Tableau's standard visualization. So if you take a look here, you can see the standard visualizations are here, and there's no drill down interactivity in that Tableau's interactive visualizations. For instance, if I click here, you see how it's drilling in like that, and the system gets filtered out here. So if I click here, and you see how it gets filtered out, and if I click back, it filters out. So you can set up an interaction between a Tableau visualization and a visualization inside of this graphics library, which is called D3JS. D3JS is an open source JavaScript visualization library. It's a very powerful library, and I can show you some of the visualizations that is inside of the D3JS that are so powerful. For instance, you can take a look at visuals here. And this is what we used for our demo. Here's the JavaScript code that creates this visualization. And as you can click, see how it goes, filters out. And the beauty of this visualization is if you decide to add an icon or change the logo or play with this, all that code is hand coded. So you have over 100 lines of code here that you have to modify for it to work. So you can see it's not a simple drag and drop, but the advantage is you can take data from Tableau and you can modify it to fit this visualization. And all you have to do is replace the data, the JSON data from here to match with the data that your visualization requires. And that's what we did with this visualization. We went ahead and took the code, the JavaScript code, and we modified it using the Tableau's Extension API. And we took the sheets, got the information from the sheet, and loaded that information into a JSON object. And here is the challenging part, is to take the data, which is in Tableau here, take this data and modify it to a way that it would orient itself to this visualization. And that's where you would have to look at the code to see how they require the data. What is the key value pair? What is the way they want the data to be organized? Once you figure that piece out, then you would have to write this function to organize the way that they require the data, the hierarchical way they require the data. This is like writing a SQL. You're essentially modifying to get the result to fit the way it needs to be. And all you're doing after that is passing that result to your plot chart. From that point on, it's a handoff from Tableau to your D3 visualization. And from that point on, it just goes right down to the D3 chart, and you're using the same functions that you just saw in this example on the site. So the extensions is not a low code or no code solution. It's a heavy code solution. But if your client requires complex visualizations, for instance, let's show you some of our clients' visualizations that are extremely complex. So for instance, let's take a look at this one. In this one, for Nova Fishery, if we click on one of this, you can see how the charts are overlaying on top. And you can see the depth of information that we're providing, and also mousing over and having something called show project description. So all these details can be embedded, which in Tableau is fairly hard to do. So if you wanted a website where your client wants to use the Tableau desktop as actually a website, where they want to have interactive content, then using Tableau extensions and coupling it with a good graphics library like D3JS would be so beneficial. For instance, look at the depth of information that we're overlaying on top. Again, this is over 2,000 lines of code. So this is not a very simple visualization. Again, The graphics library is why we're using D3JS, because we don't want to build our own SVG scalar vector graphics to create all these visuals. So we're using the D3JS library. In fact, the early version of Tableau was using the D3JS library to do some of their visualization inside of Tableau Desktop. Okay, this is one example. Another example is, again, if you wanted a more elaborate one where you click on it and then you have all these relationships, you click here and it provides all these relationships. Then you have controls, which we'll show you next week, how to create these controls. You can do interaction between the different aspects, and you pull the data from Tableau, just like you would have a sheet. You would pull all your data from the sheet, and then you would pass that on using your code here. So, and then you would open up the sheet, pull up the fields that you need, reorganize to fit the visualization, and pass it on to the visualization. From that point on, it's this visualization that's taken over. So this is the one-way traffic where you're looking at the Tableau sheet. From the Tableau sheets, you're loading it into the dashboard. And then here, you're loading your visualization. So essentially, you're loading your extension, the Tableau extension here, and connecting to it. Now, to troubleshoot this, you would need the Chrome browser. So let's say if you wanted to troubleshoot and see if you made a change to the code, you wanted to see where is the exceptions, there is a browser component to it called the Chromium. And once you set up the Chromium and run your Tableau on debug mode, so this particular Tableau instance is actually running on a debug mode. So now you can see as I move my mouse over, you can see what's happening in the background. So you can do your code manipulations. You can see how it's being rendered, what are the translations. And I think this is important for troubleshooting. And the way that you would do this is you can see I'm going to a specific localhost URL. That URL comes from the debug mode that you set up when you launch your Tableau. So when you launch your Tableau, you have to put a flag to launch it on debug mode. In that case, it's going to give you, it's going to run a web server in the backend, and it's going to give you that connector so you can troubleshoot and do debug coding like you would do on a traditional JavaScript. So that's the, and there's a link on the Tableau Extensions website, shows you how to do the debug code. Okay, now that we've seen what this can do, let me go ahead and disable the, there we go. So once I do that, I'm back to here. Now that you've seen all these interaction between the extension and the Tableau worksheets, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual JavaScript API. So here's the JavaScript API. So if you were to load this visual in your website, you can go ahead and click run this code, and it'll load the visual. And let's say if you wanted to go ahead and make this visual interactive, for instance, you wanted to do this. Let's say let's refresh that. You can have your visual interactively moving. And that is where, remember we talked about how interaction plays a big role in the way the customer looks at your content. Now, having an interactive playing of your visual, of your company's metrics, just kind of gives the user a kind of passive at the same time. Their brain is thinking about it, so they don't have to click around with the mouse and try to understand the visual. So it's like walking and talking, right? The parallel processing of the brain, we can let the brain focus on the correlations and the connections and kind of look at the data in a different way. And that's kind of where this whole concept of interaction is going. As we are all, more into looking at content in a passive way, like watching an ad or watching a and Netflix. We're not interacting with it with the mouse, right? The same way, if our visualization can also be moving and interacting in a way like this, that would be very engaging. And at the same time, your consumer can look at a lot of content. We very quickly, while I was talking, you went all the way from 2000 to 2019. You went close to 19 years while I'm talking. And your eye is constantly looking at correlations. What's happening to HP? What's happening to Nokia? What's happening to Disney? Your mind is just understanding the dynamics of your data. So that is the power of using Tableau extensions and Tableau JavaScript API. You can make your graphs visual so they can start moving. And to add to that, they provide you APIs where you can dynamically run some function to filter, some function to go to different tabs. And you see how that's moving like that? Now you can set up a JavaScript function so it'll automatically move with a play button. So you don't have to keep clicking, it'll just move. In a traditional version, you would have to keep clicking this. There's a play button to play this. So that's where you would use JavaScript APIs to do that auto increment. And again, there's a lot of other functions and events you could create. For instance, you can have an event where you can actually click on one of this and fire an event that's independent of Tableau. So now your website may have a chatbot. You can click on one of these data points, and then you can pull up a chatbot and talk to the analyst for that data point. Or you can bring up a Salesforce chatter, and then you can interact with Salesforce chatter while you're clicking on that link. So that's the power of using the JavaScript API. Remember, the Extensions API is used to take data from the Tableau visual and visualize it using your own library. The JavaScript API is used to interact with your visual and do what we're doing here, is click around and play with it. So they both complement each other, and they're in the same space, but they are kind of two separate libraries. One is the extensions. One is called Tableau.js. Another one's called Extensions API.js. So they're two separate, but they do the same thing, is they interact with your visualization. So when you create the extension, you also create something called a manifest file. And the manifest is like this. You would give the description for it, and then you would have an icon that you would embed into it. And then you have the name of the company, the organization, and the website. So it kind of has this is kind of your product packaging. And when you product package it, there are certain fields you want to put in, and those fields are let me go ahead and bring this up full screen. So you can see you have the extensions container. This is how you would drag and drop the extension in. And then once you drag and drop the extension in, you can go ahead and do something called configuration. So you can have different parameters, like you can have instructions. The user can put in their company logo, or if they have forecast data, or if they want to load some data into your extension for it to work properly, you can set up that. And that is the configuration dialog. As it brings up one of these extensions, I can go to data tables, I click it, and I can click the download. Then all it's going to download is that one Trex file. So it's obviously going to ask me to log in, and then it's going to let me download that Trex file, and then it's going to load it into the Tableau section, like the way we did with here. This is a Trex file that was loaded in. Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit of idea of how your Trex file is built. And from here, all you're doing is you're passing it on to another server that you're hosting all the files, such as your scripts, your node. So we're running a Node.js here, and that's what's doing all the interaction and all the communication. So essentially, you're having your own Node.js running and interacting with your dashboard. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at what's happening with the, and this is how the Trex file loads into the server. Okay, so finally, what's happening with Salesforce and Tableau, and how does all this fit together? What's happening is I think the Einstein Analytics and Tableau, they're kind of bringing them together under one umbrella called Tableau CRM. And essentially, Einstein Analytics has all these components. Tableau has all these components. So when you go into Einstein Analytics and Tableau combined, I think they just took that AI ML component and stretched it across all the way up to Tableau. And then they took that EA data store and stretched it across to the hybrid query. So if that's the case, that they're stretching these across, then I think what we're seeing is that Tableau Extensions and Tableau JavaScript API may be the core component that is going to interact between the two. And also the Tableau Extensions and Tableau JavaScript API may be the component that's going to do the interface between the AI ML and your visualization. So that could be some change. I'm not sure how it's all going to flow together, but at this time you can see how everything is kind of fragmented. But I think that's what they're going to do soon, is come up with a consolidated framework and then try to probably merge the APIs, which is the Tableau JavaScript API and the Tableau Extensions API. So if you are to develop something on top of these two APIs, eventually that'll get rolled into probably the App Exchange as part of the bigger ecosystem and interface with Salesforce. So we're at a very early stage of looking at all this, but it's a good place to start is to look at the Tableau Extensions website, to look at the Tableau UI guidelines to make sure when you design these extensions, you're following their guidelines. And this is the checklist they use to make sure that your extension is following the rules. Like, for instance, using the right spinner and using the right font and right size and all those. Okay, saying that, I think that concludes our webinar for today. Next week, we're going to go deeper into the how we're going to use Tableau extensions and load data into a database. What we saw today was how to just access the data using the Extensions API. So all this information will be provided out to you. So we will send you the details of the webinar so you can click on the links and start going through all the code that was shown today. Okay. Also, quickly in the one of the requests was to show a word cloud and how easy it is to do a word cloud. So I wanted to show you a word cloud. So this was something that was requested from our previous webinar. So to do a word cloud is very straightforward in Tableau. The way to do a word cloud is you would go in here and you would pick up, let's say, for instance, an amount, sales amount, put it in color, and you would take that and put it in size. And then all you have to do is, let's say we're doing state, pull the state into label. You have this heat map chart like that. All you want to do is now change this to text. And there you go. You have your word cloud. Straightforward and easy. You can mouse over and you can embed it in your dashboard. Okay. That's it for today, folks. Any questions, please let me know. Let me see. Purnima, any questions in our chat? Awesome. Okay, folks, thank you, and see you next week. Next week is going to be very interesting because we're going to click on one of these data points and change the value, and it's going to go right into the database and change it dynamically. So the write back functionality has been something our clients have been asking for a long, long time. So we are going to start implementing the write back using the Tableau extensions and JavaScript API. Thanks again, and see you next week.